Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Looks like some of you were having problems getting into the virtual classroom. I as well. In fact, this morning I couldn't get in until just a few minutes ago. So hopefully everything has been resolved. Hopefully, because it looks like it's up and running now. Looks like I'm able to get in. Hopefully all of you can get in. It's really important if you guys are having problems getting into the virtual library that you're letting me know. I know maybe sometimes it might be related to your broadband, maybe sometimes it's related to the server, but if you're having extended or serious issues getting into the virtual classroom, it's important just to let me know so that I can forward that information on, so that I can let the authorities know. I'm sure that they are aware of the situation, but it's important to get feedback from you guys if you're having some issues
Good
accessing
morning, teacher.
the classroom. Good morning. Good morning, Caro, Angel, Mariana, Paulina. Good morning, Eileen, Vanessa. Today, guys, today, I hope your mics are working. It'd be great too if you want to turn on your camera. It'd be awesome to see also your lovely faces, but at least if you have a microphone. Today, what I'd like to do is practice the limericks. Yesterday, we introduced specific aspects of the limerick. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And see if I can. Let's see if the servers. Oh, doesn't look like I'm able to get in now. All right. Well, we're going to go into Microsoft Teams under Files. I'm going to open up a document here under Creative Writing, Limerick Class Notes. So yesterday we looked at certain characteristics of a limerick. And I'd like to begin today by summarizing again what we talked about yesterday about what is characteristic about a limerick. Okay, so let me just put some notes down here at the bottom. What do you think? What's one thing we need to think about when we're writing a limerick?
Mm, the rhymes.
Okay, and what rhymes?
The first, second, and fifth sentence, and the third and the fourth has to rhyme.
All right. So we have to rhyme the first, second, and fifth, and the third and fourth. And we're going to look at an example here. Not a great example, but an example. It should rhyme. All right. What else? What else do we need to consider?
Mm, the syllables.
All right. And typically, how many syllables go in each line?
Uh, Seven on the first three. Well, no, in the first, second, and fifth, and five in the third and the fourth.
All right. So the first, second, and fifth, we should have 7 syllables. Now, there are exceptions, and we're going to see some exceptions today, but this is just a general rule that I think will help us to begin developing each of these lines. So 7 syllables, and lines 3 and 4, 5 syllables. Okay. What else? What else is characteristic of a limerick? got the rhyme, we've got the syllables. What else?
It's fun and silly.
Okay, so it should tell a fun or funny or silly story. Okay, it should tell a story, but it should be fun or funny. It should be a silly story, right? So no serious poems here, not for the limerick. There should be a light poem, a light story, a funny story. Anything else?
It has to have intonation.
Okay. Intonation. And the right intonation. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. That's the intonation. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Right? That is the intonation for the limerick. It's very much like a song. You can almost hear the song in the background, the way that the intonation goes. So we're not going to read it like da 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 da. No, that would be like the opposite. It's just a flat tone, no change, no variation whatsoever. We want the highs and we want the lows. Intonation. Anything else? Anything else that we need to consider? There's one other thing that we didn't really talk much about yesterday, but we're going to talk about with all the poems, and this is something really that's a part of creative writing, and that is the use of figurative language. Figurative language. So here, let's see if I can go back here. I have a link to a page that we're going to be looking at, and I think it's a really good page for you to review. Whenever you're thinking about ideas, you're thinking about a story for your limerick, and you're trying to find good uses of figurative language, this is a good source. And we're going to be looking at many different types of figurative language. And this is a pretty good list right here. Okay, similes, metaphors, personification, onomatopoeia, oxymoron, hyperbole, allusion. One of my favorites, alliteration, right? All of these, irony, sarcasm, anaphora, tautology, right? We're going to be looking at many different types of figurative language over the next 4 weeks. And we're going to be using poems in order to showcase these different examples of figurative language. So one of the I think the best things you can do is to go into either this page or just type in examples of similes. All right. So here we've got what a simile is. And then we have examples. Our soldiers are as brave as lions. It's comparing two things using like or as. It's like a metaphor, but it's specifically beginning with like or as. Her cheeks are red like a rose, or red as a rose. Okay, that's a simile. He is as funny as a monkey. All right, you could just say he's funny, but when you say he's funny as a monkey, it just has a whole nother meaning to it, right? Right. And this is why we want to try to use figurative language so that we can bring in this imagery, right? We can actually visualize and conceptualize some of these those messages, some of the meanings that we want to try to articulate in our poems. Okay, so sometimes if you find some examples like this, you can start playing around and inserting and creating your own limerick using some, in this case, trying to find an example of a simile. And you can do this with each of the figurative language types. and see how you can mix and match these different forms of communication right here. But as I was saying earlier, you can go in and easily find examples to most, if not all, of these examples of figurative language. In fact, this goes back to the same page that we were just at, but we can go to a different page. A 100 similes. Okay, so here's a lot right here. You could just go through this list and see which one catches your eye, depending on what it is you want to say. All right, so let's go back to this. Now, this morning, I wasn't really feeling overly creative, but I did try to put together some ideas. And here's some ideas for a limerick, and some ideas that I'm thinking about for a limerick. So I want to share with you what I've been thinking about and show you some examples of how putting together figurative language can kind of work within this type of poem. All right, so here is, I don't know if you can see this. I don't know if you want to see this, but here we go. So here's the first line. The chair that sat square on the floor had no table turned to the door. The window did scream as the ceiling just beamed. The chair, it turns out, is a bore. Now, what do you notice here? So the chair that sat square on the floor, this is an example of personification. What is personification? What do you think? You see an example here. What, in fact, every line is an example of personification. What do you think? Any idea? Maybe in some of your academic writing essays in the past, maybe one of your instructors asked you to try to avoid personification, because usually in academic writing, for the most part, we don't want to write or use this kind of figurative language. But in poems or creative writing in general, writing short stories, novels, poems, songs, personification is perfectly acceptable. What do you think? What is personification? What am I doing here that's in each of these lines?
When you give human characteristics to an object.
That's right. So the chair that sat square on the floor. Well, the chair can't sit. People can sit, right? The table had no table. All right. So the chair turned to the door. The chair can't turn to the door. The windows can't scream. The ceiling can't beam. And the chairs aren't bore. They aren't a bore. A person can be a bore. A situation can be boring, but a chair can't be a bore. All right. What else? What about this? Turns out. What is turns out? What kind of grammatical structure is turned out?
Phrasal verb.
It's a phrasal verb. Maybe in some of your academic essays, some of your instructors were asking you to try to avoid phrasal verbs, because in academic writing, we can't include those. We shouldn't include those for the most part. But in creative writing, it's all possible. We want to use phrasal verbs. We want to use personification. We want to use similes, right? So in this case, in this example, I'm doing a lot of personification. In fact, the whole basis of this poem is to try to bring objects to life, to tell a story through using objects, common objects in a room, and try to come up with something clever, right? And of course, you can argue that this is not clever whatsoever, and I would agree. But this is the intention, trying to make something silly, something out of, in this case, furniture or objects in a room, and try to do something interesting, try to tell a story. Okay. Now I can go back here and experiment and change and maybe add some different types of figurative language, but I'm trying to respect the rhyme. So I've got the first and second line, floor, door, and then the fourth line, bore. All right. And then I've got the third and fourth line, scream and beamed. Scream and beamed. Now there's a website. See if I can find it here. That's pretty good. It's not perfect, but it might be useful. Is this what it's called? Yeah. So here, like, let's say I'm looking for words that rhyme with floor. I type in floor, and hopefully I get some words that rhyme with floor. Now, this is not perfect. That is, you could still find some words in here that may or may not perfectly rhyme, but it's a pretty good start. And they do a fairly good job, depending on the word, because some words are easier than others to rhyme. And for our purposes, try to choose words that are easy to rhyme. Don't make it more difficult than it has to be. Later on in other poems, because love may or may not be one of the words you want to try to rhyme with, but love happens to be a very difficult word to rhyme with, right? The word love. You can say love, dove. That's about it. I mean, there's some others, but it's hard, especially if you're trying to write kind of a poem that's related to the topic of love. But in this case, this does a pretty good job here. Floor, scream, beam, deem, gleam, dream, theme, seam, scheme, stream, steam. Okay, so yeah, it's pretty good. You know, there's some pretty good words here, and you're going to get some neem is good too, right? So sometimes just by looking, and this is what I would suggest, find a word to start with, right? So maybe I started with floor in my example. So when I started with floor, I didn't know yet what else I was going to write about. Sometimes by looking at other words that rhyme, you might get some ideas to connect with. That is, you might find the last word of the second line and say, okay, how can I connect this first idea about floor with the next line that deals with snore, right? Because all of a sudden, see, there might be something funny there, right? Maybe the chair is snoring or something like that, right? Or roaring or swore, right? So you can get some ideas just by looking at these different words and seeing how you can fit this story, how the story kind of comes to life in your minds as you're trying to put these words together. Okay. But everybody's
Teacher,
different. Everyone's going to be, yes, go ahead.
sorry. I have a question.
No. Yes,
What
go
do you
ahead.
mean by figurative language? I mean, for example, personification goes in there, terms like that.
Yes, right. So let me go back to the list here. Let's see, where's the main list? Okay, well, this is, I guess, yeah, this is the main page here. But this is a website that's called Literary Devices. And a literary device is the same as it's figurative language. Okay, so I'll use the term figurative language to mean all these different literary devices, not all of them, but most of them, that are examples. Now, this is a huge list here. All right, so to simplify just a little bit, just to give you, I think, some of the most common types of figurative language, I've included a link here. Let's open this up again. And in this list, all right, so in this list, this is the list that I would refer to for our purposes for this semester. And we want to become familiar with this list, starting with simile all the way down to understatement. All right, and each one of these is an example of figurative language. So figurative language is the opposite of literal language. Literal language is I woke up, I brushed my teeth, I comb my hair. The language that you use in your essays, that's literal language, right? And that's really good when you're trying to write an objective academic idea, right? Or a text. But in creative writing, we want the reader to visualize some sort of the message that we're trying to write. As the writer, we want the reader to visualize and feel and sense and imagine the message, the idea that you're trying to convey. And figurative language allows us to do that in a much better way than we can if we're writing very, very literal. So here we have examples, right? Let's look at what we talked about, personification, right? So personification is one example of figurative language, right? That assigns human-like characteristics. And this can have a nice effect. Right? Look at my car. She's a beauty. I don't know if you've heard, some of your friends or maybe family, somebody you know that really is into cars. They love cars. And they start to give assign pronouns to a car. And usually, for whatever reason, we refer to a car as using a female pronoun. She's a beauty, right? Isn't she a beauty? Boy, she's a beauty. And we're talking about the car. All right. The wind whispered through the grass. Well, the wind can't whisper, right? Because only people can whisper. But the sound that the wind is making through the trees or through the grass sounds like someone whispering. And so just by putting that characteristic to an object really gives us a feel for what's going on. Think about the five senses. Figurative language and all of these examples of figurative language allows us to better see something, to hear something. What does it sound like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? What does it sound like? What are the senses? How can you use the five senses to communicate your message, to communicate your story, in this case, a silly story? All right. So all of these examples here in this list, these are all examples. And I don't want to talk about all of them today, but we're going to go through, and I want you to start reading and going through these different examples of figurative language, because there's a lot of different ways that we can write figuratively instead of writing literally. And this is one of the challenges actually in writing poems, right? I may ask you, can you try to write less literally? Can you write more figuratively? And what do I mean by that? I'm asking you to look at all these different examples or some of these examples and see how you can write more figuratively. Alliteration is one of my favorite because I like the way that it sounds. Alliteration is writing a line where it begins with the same letter. Like PayPal. PayPal is a good name because there's two P's, right? PayPal. Dunkin' Donuts is a great name because it starts with D. It's two words that start with the same letter. Coca-Cola, the same thing. It's like the same word, almost the same word, but it starts with the same letter. Coca-Cola. Chuck E. Cheese. I mean, that's just fun to say. Like you just walk around all day saying Chuck E. Cheese. That's just a fun name to say. Krispy Kreme, and so on. Okay, so when you're writing your line, and these are just very short examples, but here, look at this, the fur followed free, right? You write a line and you have many words that start with the same letter. This is has a great effect. If you can create a message and a line that makes some sort of sense, but it all starts with the same letter, it has a huge impact, just the way it sounds when you're reading the poem, right? Remember that poems are not just what you have on paper or on electronic document. It's what it sounds like, because you're going to be reading your poems. Somebody's going to be listening to your poems. And that's where the beauty is in poems. It's not just to have it on text to read about it, it's to hear it. In fact, it's very common to have people get together and do poetry readings. They just get together and read each other's poems, right? And it's pretty enjoyable if you're into poems, right? So, does that answer your question, Caro?
Yes, teacher, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's take a look. What I'd like to do today, guys, is I want to allow you guys some time to practice your lines and a line reading a limerick. So let me open up here, see if I can find the link. Let's see here. Am I going to be able to get in today? So I would, in your notes, I would write down this website, Rhyme Zone. Definitely take a look at this link because we'll be referring to it a lot. And well, let's try this. All right, let's look at some examples. And I'd like to take some examples that we can kind of experiment with. And all right. All right, let's take a look at this one here. And I'm actually looking because if you notice, some of these poems have different numbers of syllables, and that's okay, right? I'm not saying that every line absolutely only can have 7 syllables. But again, when it comes to reading the poem, if you can find 7 syllables per line and you can have the words, the natural stress of the words fall into the natural strong, weak scheme of a limerick, then it's going to be easier to read. All right. So this is a good example. Let's take a look at this line. See if I can make this a little bigger. Okay. Can you guys see this? Rest in peace, Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I need a brave volunteer to read the first line, just the first line, starting with there, from there to Abe. Any volunteers? Think about the intonation, think about the stress.
Me?
Okay, go ahead.
There once was a fellow named Abe.
All right, good. How many syllables in that first line?
Mm, 7.
Okay, 7, are you sure?
Mm, oh, 8.
Okay, I think there's 8. Now, where are the stresses in the first line? This can be for anyone. Where are the stresses in the first line? In which, either which word or which part of the word?
In the second and the last one?
Which part, which word or which part of the word in the first line are
I
stressed?
think it is once and Abe. Oh no, once and named.
Are you sure? Anyone else have any ideas? Which part, which word or which part of the word
Oh,
are stressed in the first line? Because you read it correctly, Omar, right? So think back how you said it and what did you stress? Which words did you stress?
well, I think it's there once and fellow.
Is that it?
And Abe? I don't know. I'm not sure.
All right. So remember that the stresses, if we look at the stress, which syllables do we stress? If we have 7 syllables, which syllables do we stress? Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Which syllables do we stress? Which syllables? We have 7 syllables. Which syllables do we stress in when we're reciting a limerick? Da 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 da. Any ideas? Did we get lost? Can you guys hear me or?
Yeah, well, yes, I can hear you, but I'm not
Oh,
sure.
okay. Okay. All right. So remember yesterday we talked about stress and which syllables that we stress. Da 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 da. So remember that the word stress, we want to stress the second syllable, the fifth syllable, and the seventh. Okay. So this will be our word stress for the first line, the second line, and the fifth. Remember that lines 3 and 4, we want to stress the second and the fifth syllable. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Okay, so that is the normal stress. Now, let me go back to our website, web page. And did I lose my? Here we go. All right, so you were correct, Omar. You stress once. Now, the word fellow, How many syllables in fellow?
2.
Okay. Is it strong, weak, or weak, strong? The normal stress of the word fellow. Strong, weak, or weak, strong?
Mm,
Fellow. Fellow. Strong, weak, or
strong
weak,
weak.
strong? Strong, weak. All right. So when you're stressing, when you're figuring which word or words to stress, right? There once was a fellow. We're stressing fell, not oh, right? Fell. So the word stress in this first line, once, fell, and Abe. All right. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
All right. So this is what's hard about writing a limerick, is making sure that the normal stress of the words, for example, fellow, we can't pronounce it fellow. It has to be fellow. And when we stress, we have to make sure that the words they follow the normal stress of the words as we try to fit it into da 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 da, that type of stress. Okay. All right. The second line. Any volunteers for the second line? How many syllables, too? How many syllables in the second line?
Eight.
8. Anybody else? And today is the day he was slayed. How many syllables? Anybody have a different number than 8?
Nine.
9, right? The more syllables, the harder it is to read. Anyone want to try this second line? So here's the intonation, here's the word stress. The first line, da 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 da. The second line, da 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 da. So how can you make that fit? Any volunteers? No volunteers? All right, I'll take this one. Now this is hard because it's 9 syllables. This is why I'm suggesting that we all get closer to 7. The more syllables, the harder it is to read. So here's how the second line should read. And today is the day he was slayed. And today is the day he was slayed. Now this is automatically harder because we have 9 syllables. And today is the day, right? Today. How many syllables in today?
2.
Strong, weak, or weak, strong?
Strong week.
Today or today?
It's weak
Strong.
strong.
Week
Weak,
strong.
strong. Today, right? So remember that in our stress, we have in the stress of each of these lines, it should be da 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 da. So day, today, I have to stress day, right? And I have to say, and today. I have to say, and today, and today. I can't say, and today, and today is the day. No, I can't even finish the line. If I want to keep it as da 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 da, I can't stress two because it throws everything off. And today is the, and two is the day. No, I can't. It's hard. And today is the day he was slayed. And today is the day he was slayed. There once was a fellow named Abe, and today is the day he was. And today is it's hard to read. There once was a fellow named Abe, and today is the day he was slayed. Right? That's how it should read. Now the third line, da 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 da, da 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 da. Anyone want to try the third line? And how many syllables in the third line?
6.
Right, 6. All right. So in this example, which words should we stress? Da 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 da. Because we have to stress 2 words. So which 2 words do you think we should stress?
Booth and Life. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Booth, right? John Wilkes Booth, right? So Booth and Life. So anyone want to try to read this line? Da 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 da.
I think I can try it.
Go for it.
Okay. John, what? It's Wilkes? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And John Wilkes Booth took his life. I don't know.
It's hard. No, it's hard. It's hard. And it's hard because it has 6 syllables. This is why I'm showing you guys this example, because it actually has more syllables. And yes, can it be done? Yes. But it's hard. It's like you're lifting a lot more weights than you need to. But here's how you would read this, and it's hard. John Wilkes Booth took his life. John Wilkes Booth took his life. I'm stressing Booth, just as you mentioned, and life. But I got to get to Booth. I got to get to that stress. Da-dun. Instead of da-dun, I got to say John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth took his life. And that's just hard to read. That's just hard to say. It's not hard to read. It's hard to say. John Wilkes Booth took his life as he sat with his wife. As he sat with his wife. Okay. So the reason I want to show you these examples is that when you are creating your own limerick, I'm going to ask that you stay with 7, 7, 5, 5, 7 syllables. All right. Each line having those number of syllables. Because again, it's the easiest way to read it. Be very careful with the normal stress of the word. Let me give you an example. Table. Table. How many syllables in table?
2.
2. Strong, weak, or weak, strong?
Strong, weak.
Strong, weak. All right. Does everybody agree? Strong, weak. Table.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So here's my question for you. Here's the question, and it's a yes or no question. Can I begin or end any line of a limerick with the word table? Can it be the first word of any line? Can it be the last word of any line of a limerick? That's the question. Yes or no? What do you think?
No.
No,
Why?
I think
Why?
we can't. Because
Why?
the stress has to be in the second word, you can't have stress before that. Well,
Right.
you can, but it would be difficult.
Right. So the first line of every every limerick, right? Of all 5 lines, the very first word is weak, strong, right? Da-da. That's how we have to start every line. Da-da, weak, strong. And because table is strong, weak, we can't really start the word. We shouldn't start the line with table. We can say a table. We can put an article. We can put a 1-syllable preposition, maybe. But we can't begin the word. Now, we can't begin the line with the word table or any word that has a strong, weak syllable. Same way at the end of the line. Every single line of a limerick ends, the very last 2 syllables is weak, strong. The first, second, third, fourth, and fifth line of a limerick, they all end in weak, strong. So it's really hard to end a line with table. Just the word table. Okay. So you can have 1-syllable words, 2-syllable words, 3-syllable words, right? There's no rules here about how long or short words can be in your limerick. It gets more complicated when they're longer words, though. All right. But feel free to use any words that you want. Try to use figurative language. Be careful with rhyming, right? And the stress and the intonation. This is what's hard about a limerick, is trying to put all those together. All right. So begin with some sort of idea. Think of, and there's many ways that you can start. You know, if I were you, if you're not sure, if you don't have any specific ideas in mind, I would go back to the website. Let me see if I can go back to it here. I would go back to the website and begin with different word associations. I would create like 5 or 6 lists, word lists. And each list has a different rhyming scheme. So one list could be, you can choose basically a word that has a lot of words that rhyme with it, right? Floor. So make a list and create a list with all kinds of words that rhyme with floor. And you don't have to use floor, right? But the idea is that you're getting some other words, right, that you might decide to use. Now, what's another word that there a lot of words rhyme with? Well, let's try sat. My computer's going to sleep. Sat, or even say, sat, bat, dat, hat, mat. Okay, tons of words that rhyme with sat. That would be another column. And then even say. Again, you don't have to use these words, say, but look at all the words: ray, slay, stray, bay. Okay, there are all kinds of words that you can choose. All right, so any others? Oh, there's a lot. So basically, try to come up with a list of words that will help you brainstorm certain ideas. Okay, if you have some ideas already, then write those down, right? And go to the list of figurative speech, or figurative language, I should say. And also write down some list of your favorite metaphors, similes, hyperboles. Hyperboles are good. They're like an exaggeration. So you can exaggerate. You might look at alliterations. Basically, take a look at some of these and write out some examples of these. Right. And this will also help you learn what each of these are, right? And maybe it turns out that you don't use it, but you're becoming familiar with the different examples of figurative speech. I would try to include figurative speech in every line. Try to avoid literal language. And this is another difficult aspect of when we're starting poetry. We're so used to instructors saying, no figurative language, no metaphors, no hyperboles. Now we're saying, go for it, use it, right? Get familiar with some of these examples of sarcasm and irony and puns, right? And you can start using these in your story because it brings your story to life. It brings your poem to life, okay, in a way that's not possible using literal language. All right, guys. For the next class, try to put together a couple of lines of your limerick. If you can write a whole limerick, fine. But if you can at least create 1 or 2 lines for the next class, we can begin by looking and sharing our ideas for our limerick. Tomorrow, I'll create a Word document, a shared document, and we can all start to contribute and look at each other's poems as we're putting some ideas together. Okay. Any questions, guys, about anything that we've talked about today or yesterday in terms of writing a limerick?
No, teacher.
No, teacher.
Okay. Well, I think we'll stop there then, guys. And tomorrow we'll pick up where we left off today. And again, try to come up with 1 or 2 lines so we can start practice saying them and hearing them. And yeah, we'll continue on working this week on our limerick. All right. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you, teacher. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.